Welcome to week one of the Rizz Zone. We're going to be recapping today's games and talking about the slate and all of the fantasy implications. I'm one of the hosts of the show, Kinc Chugs, and alongside me is N Fantasy. Just some quick personal intros here. Been a lifelong Patriots fan for just around a year now, and I'm also a Rams fan, and I fuck with the Bucks. How about yourself, N Fantasy?
Thanks, King Chugs. This is Ben Fantasy, lifelong Texans fan, recovering Chargers fan. Looking forward to getting it started and popping here.
Thanks for that, N Fantasy. Time to pop these Caminos now, fellas. You got yours?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, just a quick ad read here. Of course, we're partners with Underdog Fantasy, best place to draft for no season commitment, best ball drafts. Nate and I did a ton of them this offseason. Super fun, low stakes drafts. Highly recommend hopping on. You can use my code KINK14 and get a $25 bonus. And we're also, of course, partnered with Blue Chew. Nate and I have been Blue Chew subscribers for, I want to say, over a year now. I know you referred me and we were able to get our first shipment for just $5. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the slate. So we're going to be going through every single game so far and talking about risers, fallers, and the fantasy implications coming out of this week one slate. So starting off, of course, with Chiefs Ravens. That was a good one, huh? In fantasy. What'd you think about it?
Yes. What a great game, You have to say the takeaways here are pretty obvious. Lamar Jackson doing what he does. Passing game was about on par with what you'd expect for Lamar. A couple of bad balls here and there. Didn't really take any good deep shots. But he was running the ball like he does. Who wasn't running the ball like he does would be Derrick Henry. He looked absolutely washed. Don't you agree, Kink Chugs?
Yeah, Derrick Henry looked cooked, guys. And I was not high on Derrick Henry coming into the year. I know he was going in the mid-second round, a lot of your redraft leagues, but I think this is a spot that I don't love him in. He's also about to enter his age 31 season. He looked completely gassed. He's at no downhill speed left in him. So that's a big takeaway. The run game on the Ravens side. On the passing side, of course, the big takeaway is we finally have the Isaiah or Ice breakout game, puts up 9 receptions, 111 yards, and gets the touchdown there coming off of 12 targets. And I'm personally a Mark Andrews owner, took him in a ton of best ball drafts, but I'm worried. And I think if you gave me the option right now and let me know what you think about this for the rest of season, Andrews or Likely, I would take Likely.
I'm all over Likely in that situation. There's no reason for me to take Mark Andrews. He looked slow. He looked unathletic. He looked like that injury was still nagging him. Not going to lie.
Absolutely did. And obviously, the only 2 targets is a real concern. I mean, had he gone out there and gotten 8 targets, just 2 catches, okay, you could say that's a bad game, but it's really that volume that's concerning to me, especially with Zay Flowers coming up, getting those 10 targets. He's clearly the go-to receiver, and it's going to be a tough season, it looks like, for Mark Andrews. I'm pretty worried. I have him in my home league. I don't know. Maybe I can go out and make a move. I actually saw Likely still on waivers, so I put in that claim after the game, hoping that that comes through. And then let's talk about the Chiefs now. So Mahomes kind of did what he did, put up almost 300 yards, had that pick. Looked pretty good, though, overall. But we know who Mahomes is. Don't really need to touch on him too much. So let's start with the running back, Isaiah Pacheco. Honestly, did not look that good, but he still gets you that rushing touchdown in fantasy and a couple of catches. So productive week, all things considered, but did not look great running against that pretty solid Ravens D line.
Totally agree. For Pacheco's price, going in early second round in some home leagues with your idiot league mates. Now, in a PPR league, that doesn't really work for me. I didn't like it going in. I don't like it now. In a standard league, it's a little bit of a different story, but Why are we taking a guy in the early second round that has little to no receiving upside coming out of the backfield? It doesn't make sense. Never did.
Yeah, right there with you. You know, I don't take running backs high, especially a guy like Derrick Henry or Isaiah Pacheco. So I was never going to take him in that spot. But the one kind of upside for you, Pacheco owners, is we did not see any other running backs getting that target volume or really work out of the backfield. So he is that bell cow and should expect to see really good volume throughout the season. So I'm not worried about Pacheco. I just didn't like him at the price tag. Still a solid game, though. And then moving down to the receivers, this is where it gets very interesting. Rashee Rice, huge game, over 100 yards on 9 targets, which is great to see. I was all over him when I could be in best ball drafts, but he got a little bit steep there at the end. I think it's safe to say we can have him as, just around a high end wide receiver 2 rest of the season. So maybe somewhere around that 15 in our consensus wide receiver rankings moving forward. So really like what he's showing. Look, he is a slant merchant. That's probably fine, though. He's pretty quick. So super excited about Rashee Rice. And then how about you touch on Xavier Worthy? What did you see out of him?
Man, what we saw out of him, he was lights out, insanely fast. Now we saw him playing that Debo Samuel type gadget role, and he was very, very good at it. What we also saw was that one end zone target where Mahomes tossed it up. I mean, Xavier Worthy is not a big guy. That's not his game. I guess the Chiefs haven't figured that out yet. But when they do, and they just play him in the role where he's coming out of the backfield on those end arounds, man, he's going to be lethal. And I definitely didn't like him at his price, but I am regretting that now.
Absolutely agree. I think Worthy, especially in best ball, really great player. Looks to be always advertised to be with the speed. So that is very exciting if you were able to get him in underdog best ball drafts. On the redraft format, I'm not sure what to do with him. If I had him, I don't know if he's a week to week starter. I think I need a little bit more time to see his continued usage. And obviously, a lot of his value will come with the breakaway touchdowns. And I'm not sure that we can project that out super confidently, but still very exciting game from him and looking forward to continue to see what he does. Now let's talk about your guy, Travis Kelce. What do we think about Kelce going forward?
Man, oh man, what is there to think about Travis Kelce? It's hard. It's hard to say. People love to glaze Travis Kelce. I mean, I probably took him far too high in the third round. I liked him. I had him in 2022. He was fantastic for me. Now we know last year was the first year he declined. He's going into his year 35 season, all these concerns, and now it's actually playing out where he's not getting the target share that we're used to seeing out of him. And personally, as an owner, Travis Kelce, I'm very concerned.
Agreed. I've never been a Kelce guy. That's burned me in the past, but this year, I think he was like my tight end 4 or something behind Laporta, McBride, and Andrews. And I saw that you and Owen took him, I believe, at like 30. And I was really surprised to see that coming off of the down year, adding in Rashee Rice. And with the expectation that Pacheco will see a lot of volume in the red zone as well. So I did not like that. I'm also worried, but I think Travis Kelce is still going to be a top 5 tight end rest of season. I mean, the tight end position is absolutely disgusting right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, interesting thoughts on Kelce. We'll just have to see his role moving forward, but just wasn't there this past week. And then
Totally
going
agree.
over to our next game down in Brazil, Rio, I believe, or Sao Paulo. But Packers taking on the Eagles. Obviously, Eagles come out on top. Really disappointing game for Jordan Love with that injury, lower leg injury. Looks like he'll be out a little over a month, which is really bad news. Packers kind of have a tough schedule, and Malik Willis potentially is the worst quarterback in the league. Bryce Young's up there though, so not too sure. So I'm pretty disappointed and frankly worried for most of those Green Bay assets aside from Josh Jacobs. So how about you take us down and provide some key takeaways from this game?
Man, I mean, we saw that game. We watched Jaden Reed. He looked fantastic. Again, of course, you have to be concerned. What does his production look like going forward with no Jordan Love? We don't know. Malik Willis, you cannot trust that guy. We know that for a fact. Now, Jaden Reed with his 138 receiving yards, touchdown, and then he had that end around 33 yards rushing, touchdown. It was incredible. He looked great. But that being said, you can't trust that with Malik Willis. So maybe we think about him as more of a stash play, more of a long term play. You let him sit on your roster and you don't start him. But he is a guy that if he is available on waivers because your idiot league mates did not draft him, you should be all over Jaden Reed.
Couldn't agree more. Love that as a stash play. You could also go out there if you're in a pretty shallow format, like an 8-man league or something, and try to trade for him and just keep him on your bench moving forward. I know I have him in my 8-man league and looking forward to getting him back in the lineup in a couple weeks here, a couple months. And then, yeah, I'm not sure I'm starting anyone on the Packers outside of Josh Jacobs until Jordan Love comes back, including Reed. So definitely concerning and disappointing with the Jordan Love injury. One takeaway from me was that Dontavian Wicks did not look like a good football player in this game. Has a couple drops off 3 targets, gets that big PI call. That was pretty helpful for the game. But overall, I don't think you even need to roster Wicks in your leagues. And he probably isn't rostered in all of them. But if he is, go ahead and cut him, pick up high upside running back. We'll talk about some of those plays in a little bit here. But yeah, Wicks did not look great. Christian Watson gets you the receiving touchdown off of 5 targets, but I don't know. I've never been that high on Christian Watkins anyway. So I think we can kind of just sit on our Packers assets for now or look to make other moves until Jordan Love comes back. And on the Eagles side, Jalen Hurts gets you a couple of passing touchdowns, 2 pretty bad picks, and doesn't get you that rushing touchdown, which you kind of need if you want to get there with him in fantasy week to week. I'll let you talk about other takeaways from this game, including Barkley. I know you used to be a Giants fan, so any thoughts around him?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree on all the points with Jalen Hurts. As far as Saquon Barkley, that is a tough conversation to have. I mean, the Giants went on to HBO and detailed their decision making on getting rid of Saquon Barkley, and it is biting them in the ass. He looked fantastic out there. Now, only 4.5 yards per carry, which is better than his recent years with the Giants. Granted, much better O line, much better support cast. You know, giving you take, but he had 24 carries. He's got volume. He is everything that you look for in a back. Good O line. He's got the rushing volume. He has the receiving upside, as we saw when he got that very impressive receiving touchdown. I mean, as a former Giants fan, and thank God I'm not anymore, that hurts to see. Those guys in New York, that organization is in shambles, trading away your best asset to a division rival. I can't imagine my Texans ever doing something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty jarring to see from the Giants fans' perspective. But just last point on Saquon Barkley, he looked absolutely great. But I think that we can be a bit concerned for Jalen Hurts upside this season if Saquon Barkley is going to continue to have this workload and kind of vulture some of those rushing touchdowns that got Jalen Hurts 15 rushing TDs last year. All right, let's
Definitely
go
agree.
ahead and talk about some other big takeaways from this week. Not going to go through every game, but we'll hit on the big takeaways for fantasy football. Starting really quickly on the Panthers Saints, Bryce Young is an absolute bust. Been saying that probably the moment he stepped onto the field last year. He looked awful. You cannot start anyone in this Carolina offense at all. I know some of you drafted Deontay Johnson maybe in like the 6 or 7. That's going to be a terrible pick. And on the Saints side of things, Derek Carr looked pretty good. 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He looked good. Alvin Kamara gets there with the targets, gets there with the rushing yards, gets you that touchdown. He looked really good. I'm not
Yeah,
sure I'm starting anyone else. I guess we can start Olave, but I don't know. That was kind of a disappointing game. And if you drafted Olave, you've got to be concerned. Anything else from this game you want to touch on?
yeah. I mean, I would say, I would add to that Jamal Williams did get one. He did get one of those rushing touchdowns that he stole from Kamara. They did split the backfield, but Kamara was far more productive. He had 5.5 yards per carry, and he still has that receiving upside, 5 catches for 27 yards. He's still a good fantasy asset, no matter how you look at it. He's getting old, but he still looks good.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, and moving along to the Texans game. What'd you think about that? Who do you like coming out of the game? Any thoughts around your Texans win today?
Yeah, I mean, I think Texans fans should be reassured. CJ Stroud is the guy. Definitely is the guy. Now, one thing I did not expect coming into this season was Joe Mixon being this productive. 30 carries, 159 rushing yards, and a touchdown, 5.3 yards per carry. That's efficient. He's good. He also tacked on 3 catches for 19 yards to that. It's not lights out, it's not mind blowing, but in that stacked offensive lineup, to get even those that many catches is pretty good. And in a PPR format, you got to take that into account. Now, Nico Collins looked fantastic. That sideline catch where he got that knee down, that was very impressive. Tank Dell didn't quite get the same volume we saw last year. I didn't really love him at his price. Same with Stephon Diggs. I mean, it's really tough. There's so much good talent in that offense. It's hard to pick unless you've got the true one and Nico Collins. I'd expect going forward that this Texans offense continues to be extremely productive. CJ Stroud is spreading the love, but man, Nico Collins looked great, and so did Joe Mixon.
Absolutely agree on the Joe Mixon front. Looks to be an absolute league winner this year if we can keep up this volume. Surprisingly to me, he does not look cooked at all. He honestly still looks really explosive and fast. So I'd be super excited if I was a Joe Mixon owner. And take us through the Colts side of things. I know we had kind of a breaking onto the scene game for a lot of fans with AR-15 in terms of the arm talent. So any thoughts around him moving forward or some of those other Colts players like JT?
I mean, we saw Anthony Richardson have, there were some questionable decisions here and there, but the guy has an absolute rocket. He gets that ball out fast and he zips it to his receiver. I mean, his stat line tonight: 9 of 19, 9 completions, 212 yards and 2 tuds. Had that one pick, but 212 yards on 9 completions is something else. I mean, he also had 6 carries, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Man, he looks good. He looks
I'm
good. If I was a Colts
super,
fan, I'd be excited.
yeah, I'm very excited on Anthony Richardson. That arm is incredible. We saw, what was that? I think he threw the ball 60 yards carrying in the air to Alec Pierce on that one big throw. So that was pretty insane. Looks great. Really excited about him moving forward. And I think we'll continue to have him ranked as a top 5 quarterback moving forward. Want to touch quickly on Jonathan Taylor. Gets you the touchdown, but we don't get any targets. What do we think about JT? He was going in a lot of leagues round 1, but we just don't see that upside from him today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question. It's a question. Now, I was high on JT coming into the season, which I'm not sure you even know. I thought JT was going to be great coming into this season, fully healthy for the first time since I think 2021. We were expecting to see a lot out of him. I was expecting a lot. 16 carries for 48 yards. Not terribly efficient now. I mean, obviously my Texans are great, so hard team to come up against week one. But you know, longer term, we're just going to have to see how JT's season pans out. I mean, he could turn it around. This Colts offense seems like they've got a few things to work out, and once they do, I think they're going to be electric. Now, that just stands something we'll need to see. But we did see those two deep balls to Alec Pierce. Man, it's exciting. I would also be excited if I were a Colts fan.
Absolutely agree. I love JT, but at his price this year and the Anthony Richard running dynamic, I was not really drafting him. But from a real life perspective, I think he's a great running back. However, without getting there with the targets and the receiving volume, I'm not sure he's going to pan out to be a top five running back this year, which is obviously where he was drafted. And let's talk through Michael Pittman Jr. This was one of my least favorite receivers coming into the year. Why? Well, Anthony Richardson, while he's electric, great to watch, we just are not going to have the passing volume to get Michael Pittman to be where his price was, which in a lot of ESPN leagues, he was going in the 20s, which is absolutely insane to me. He gets 4 catches, 31 yards, really disappointing day. I would be concerned if that was my wide receiver 2 or even wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. I think that that's going to set you up to be a pretty underperforming team against your league. So a little bit concerned for him, but never liked his situation going into the year anyway. And I think we can go ahead and move along to the Giants versus the Vikings. I'll let you start us off with that game. Did you catch any of that game and anything coming out of that?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I did watch just a little bit of it, but man, was it painful. Daniel Jones is not the guy. As if we needed 6 years and $160 million to figure that out. He looked horrible. He was terrified. He was just god awful. He couldn't find a single pass. He completed 22 passes on 42 attempts for 186 yards, no passing touchdowns, and 2 picks. And they were not good picks either. It was really bad. Just a continuation of what we've seen out of Daniel Jones. He does not look like he did in 2022, which, to be quite honest, wasn't even that good then. So these Giants, I don't think I would touch anyone in this offense. Malik Neighbors did look good, but you cannot rely on Daniel Jones as your quarterback. Now, a sleeper pick here, Wan'Dale Robinson, a short guy, drafted in 22 out of Kentucky. He looked good. He's a great slot receiver. He gets separation, but again, Daniel Jones just can't be that guy. So for me personally, until they figure out that quarterback room, and maybe the answer is maybe it's Drew Lock, maybe it's Tommy DeVito to get Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson the ball. In any case, we know it's not Daniel Jones. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Daniel Jones is absolutely horrible. I don't think you can start anyone in this Giants offense unless you want to throw Neighbors into your slot, your flex spot, and hope that he gets you a touchdown every few weeks. But me personally, I'm not excited about anyone. Motor, Tank, or Devin Motor Singletary does not look particularly good. We kind of know who he is. Not a very talented running back, getting older as well. Yeah, so not much to take away out of that Giants game. They are as bad as we thought, and you've got to be concerned if you drafted Neighbors pretty high. But I know in our league he fell, I don't know, maybe to like the 5th or 6th round. So you're not that concerned given that price
Yep.
point. And this is his first game as a rookie. But he did look
Yep.
good. And Wan'Dale Robinson, if you play in a deep league, can potentially look to add him to your bench and maybe start him if you have some buys or injuries. Great. Let's move
Yep.
along and talk about the Pats. My Pats, huge road win against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Going into Cincinnati, defense gets the job done. Brissett manages the game. has a couple of really impressive plays, but I think the big takeaway here is Ramondre Stevenson. He looked unbelievable. 120 yards. They give him the rock 25 times. That is absolutely elite volume. And we're so excited about that. Gets you that touchdown and has 3 targets out of the backfield. So if you were able to get Ramondre at like pick 70 in that range, you're printing money right now. You could not be more excited. And as a Pats fan, this was a really encouraging win with the new regime, with Jacoby Brissett, and very excited. Any thoughts on Patriots players? I mean, you're probably not starting anyone outside of Ramondre anyway. So, but any thoughts around them?
Totally agree on Ramondre. I don't know that I would touch anybody else. I'm excited to see what Jalen Polk can do this season. Later on in the season, when we're seeing Drake May on the field rather than Jacoby Brissett. No, I don't really have much to add. Antonio Gibson, obvious disappointment as he's been for years. Um, yeah, no, nothing else to add from me on the Pats. I guess we can move over to the Bengals. And man, these Bengals, Joe Burrow, very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. He has no Rizz anymore. He's completely fallen off. 21 of 29 for 164 yards. I mean, I think he still has some work to do in getting back into the rhythm of things. These Bengals are never the greatest in week one, but I don't know that I'm super excited if I'm a owner of Jamar Chase, of T. Higgins, of Chase Brown, of Zach Moss. I don't know if you disagree, but I wouldn't be too worried if I was a Jamar Chase owner. T. Higgins injury, we'll see how that plays out, but I don't see the upside to Joe Burrow as a starting quarterback in fantasy leagues. I don't see him as too much better than any of the regular game manager quarterbacks like Jared Goff. You know, I'll turn it over to you for any further thoughts there.
Completely agree. On Joe Burrow, I know he was going in like the fifth or sixth round, which is absolutely insane to me when guys like Matt Stafford are on waivers. So Joe Burrow, really disappointed with that game. However, I will throw some positivity for you, Cincinnati Bengal asset owners or fans. Vegas projects Bengals to be a top 5 scoring offense through doing some implied team totals math for the rest of the season. And Vegas knows a lot more than me and you. So I think moving forward, we can expect to see a big uptick in productivity from the Bengals. So I would not panic if I'm Jamar Chase, T. Higgins owner. Joe Burrow, yeah, I hated that price you got him at. You got to be disappointed there. And briefly on the running backs, Zach Moss gets 9 carries, 44 yards, and a touchdown. I think you can start Moss if you really need to, but it's not a guy you're particularly excited about. And Chase Brown, if you drafted him over Zach Moss for rest of season play, you're probably okay with that, but he doesn't look particularly dynamic or uh, kind of has the making to be a league winning profile. So that's a little bit of food for thought there on Cincinnati side.
Yeah,
Just a
I think
disappointing week, but should see a bounce back.
yeah, I mean, with all the Bengals, I guess it's more of a wait and see at this point. So not too many concrete takeaways, but more of a we'll see how this team pans out after losing week one to the Pats, who are projected to be one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were projected to be the worst team in the league at 4.5 wins for their season long over under. I personally took the over side of things. I was pretty optimistic relative to the baseline on the Pats and way more optimistic after today. So very excited for this team and looking forward to next week against Seattle. Moving along to the Steelers Falcons. That was an interesting game to say the least. I think it's time to panic on a couple of these Falcons. Drake London, why were you going in the second round of leagues? An underdog, Drake London was going on average at 15. This guy still looks like a huge bum. Gets you 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 15 yards. That is absolutely awful. Ray McLeod leads the receiving room with 7 targets. Ray McLeod. You've got to be in full panic mode if you took Drake London. Your team's looking absolutely awful for the rest of the season. Very, very disappointing. We do get the Kyle Pitts touchdown, though, which is nice to see given some of the struggles he's had around the end zone throughout the last few years. But again, might be time to panic on these Falcons.
Totally agreed. Drake London's price never made any sense to me. Could this be the Kyle Pitts year? Could it be? It might be. Bijan Robinson looked. I mean, Bijan is Bijan. You know what? He's going to be electric. He's going to be explosive. Granted, 3.8 yards per carry today, not great, but he did also catch 5 balls for 43 receiving yards. So maybe not the most productive in terms of efficiency in real life, but he still has that receiving upside that you come to expect from a Bijan Robinson. The fact that Ray
Yep,
McLeod is
absolutely.
leading this team in receiving yards is extremely concerning. That is all I have to say about the Falcons.
Yeah, just a very, very disappointing day from the Falcons. Outside of Bijan Robinson, we're going to get week in and week out from him. So I think you're still pretty happy with him on your team. Moving over to the Steelers side. Oh, and last thought on the Falcons, you cannot start Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. Just go pick up Stafford. Was a way better real life quarterback and fantasy asset. And then on the Steelers side, Justin Fields goes down to Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, gets the job done. He actually looked pretty good. Get you 57 rushing yard on 14 attempts, which is obviously a lot. So, I mean, you're not starting Justin Fields in fantasy, but from a real life perspective, pretty encouraging and a really good road win for the Steelers. Now, on the rushing side, Najee Harris does okay. 70 yards is obviously good from a real life perspective, but he just doesn't really have the receiving upside, gets 2 targets, which is honestly pretty solid for Harris, but just 9 yards on 1 catch there. So I have Najee Harris. I didn't start him this week, started Mostert. I'm not excited. I was never excited when I drafted Najee Harris, but when you're down in that part of the draft, you just kind of want someone with a projectable volume in case you have to start him. So not really concerned about Harris. Kind of is what we expect, but I don't think he has league-winning upside or anything. And how about you talk about these Pittsburgh receivers for us?
I mean, there's really not too much to touch on here. I mean, you've got George Pickens. He's the obvious one there. 6 receptions, 85 yards. He has games where he's just gonna absolutely explode and give you 30 points. This wasn't one of those games, but he does have that potential. With Justin Fields and Russell Wilson at quarterback, I find it very hard to start any of these guys. I don't know if people want to look at this game from Pickens and say, well, if he's able to do this with Justin Fields throwing for 156 yards, I mean, he's getting half of the receiving yards out of that. Yeah, targets, volume, all that. It's great. I think it's, again, we're going to have to wait and see how this Steelers offense pans out if they're able to turn it around and actually be productive in the passing game. Now, if you ask me, the only valuable fantasy asset on this team is Chris Boswell. He was great. And I think we can expect to continue to see that throughout the season.
Really like you throwing Chris Boswell in there. Man deserves his respect. Great game from him. And agreed on the other points. Pickens, you can still start him week to week. He has that volume. It's just the quarterback play is the question mark for his overall upside. Let's go ahead and talk about phenomenal game up in Highland Park. I believe that's the name of where the Bills play, but could be wrong on that. Anyway, Cardinals coming in to Buffalo.
think it's Highmark
Really
Stadium, but
exciting
we'll,
stuff.
we'll keep going.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, good to know. Anyway, really exciting stuff from this game on both sides. From the Cardinals side, Kyler Murray looked pretty good. I know he doesn't really have the yards you want to see out of a game where they score 28 points, just 162 yards through the air. Gets you the touchdown, though. And on the rushing side, breaks away for a 30-yard run. Still extremely explosive, extremely fast. You still, nothing really changes here rest of season with Kyler Murray. You're pretty excited if you have him on your team. And he looked good, get you those 60 rushing yards. So still excited about Kyler. James Conner, 50 yards, touchdown, and 3 catches for 30 yards. Really great game from him. You're super excited if you're able to get him in the later rounds of your ESPN drafts. He looks like a pretty solid running back two for the next few weeks. We'll see about if Trey Benson kind of increases his role moving forward. So maybe that's a guy you think about selling to one of your idiot league mates for a good price over the next few weeks. But he did look really good. How about those receivers?
Well, about those receivers, you can't put too much stock in this, but Marvin Harrison Jr., first game in the NFL, 1 reception for 4 yards. Not the greatest. Not what you expect to see out of who was touted as a generational talent. And I still think he will be that generational talent. But a very disappointing start from Marvin Harrison Jr. when you have Greg Dortch leading the team in receptions and receiving yards with 6 receptions for 47 yards. Just disappointing overall. Trey McBride, another disappointment. He did get 5 receptions for 30 yards, but overall, not what you expect to see out of somebody you're taking at that price. Now, I think we can expect Kyler Murray and the Cardinals to become a more capable passing offense as the season goes on and they get it figured out. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will become much better as the season goes on. Beyond that, Michael Wilson was a guy that a lot of people liked as a sleeper pick. Didn't see too much out of him. He didn't look terrible, didn't look great. I guess we'll see what happens to him as the season goes on. If Greg Dortch continues to carry a lot of the receiving volume going forward, and when Marv gets into stride, what he takes from that game, I don't think Michael Wilson will be a great sleeper pick as he was touted to be. But again, as the season goes on, we'll see what these cards look like.
Great point there on Michael Wilson. That's a guy I drafted a ton of in our Underdog Best Ball drafts. And again, if you want to draft with us on Underdog, use my code Kinc14 and hop in some drafts. Kind of some in-season stuff going on there. You can join. But anyway, let's talk about the Buffalo Bills. Really just Josh Allen. That guy is absolutely phenomenal. Big playmaking ability, great legs. He looks like the #1 overall quarterback for the rest of season, which is where most of you took him at. So you've got to be super excited. He probably won you your league your game this week, so you're really happy about him. On the rushing side, I mean, James Cook gets 71 yards, has all the rushing volume, gets you 3 catches, 30 yards, gets you, a reasonable week. You're not super disappointed. You're not thrilled. He kind of is what you expect. I'm not really sure that James Cook is that good of a real life running back. I think he's okay. He's not super dynamic or explosive, but pretty okay catching out of the backfield. So really no changes on our thoughts around James Cook. And on the receiving side, you're a little bit disappointed with a few players here. Mostly my favorite tight end, Dalton Kincaid. 1 catch, 11 yards off 2 targets. That is terrible. You took him to be a league-winning tight end. I took him in the 5th round. Maybe you got him in the 6th. And he puts up 2 points for you in fantasy. So you're very frustrated with that. Look, if he doesn't get an increased target volume over the next few weeks, then we really panic. Right now, It's really frustrating and disappointing, but I don't think we can full blown panic yet on Dalton Kincaid. Keon Coleman gets you 5 targets, 4 catches, 51 yards. You're not starting him right now, but as the season progresses, we'll keep an eye on him and potentially has a lot of value moving forward in this offense. So you're encouraged by that. And then Shakir gets you the big touchdown. Probably never going to start Shakir in your league, but in best ball, you're definitely excited if you took him in some of the later rounds. Any thoughts on these Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I think people can be excited about Keon Coleman. I think he looked pretty good. I think he had a couple of catches that were pretty impressive. Now, once Josh Allen gets more used to Keon as his target, I mean, losing Stephon Diggs was Josh's guy. I think once Keon becomes the new Stephon Diggs, if and when that does happen, I think owners in both best ball and redraft leagues can be very excited to see what Keon Coleman can offer. But you're definitely not starting him now. 4 receptions for 51 yards is not enough volume. I think going forward, we'll see more more dynamic play out of him, and he'll become that contested catch guy that he was always known to be at FSU. That's all I have
Yep,
to add on those.
absolutely.
I don't think we saw enough of Ray Davis to come away with anything valuable, but we were just watching the Josh Allen show throughout the day. He really picked it up in the second half, but that's just what Josh Allen does.
Yeah, Josh Allen is just different. I love the guy. Super fun to watch, and we'll be excited for the Bills rest of the season. Good win today. Moving along
Lot
now to
of Rizz.
Tennessee. Yes, Josh Allen does have a lot of Rizz. All
A
right, let's move
lot.
along to Tennessee at Chicago. Very disappointing loss for Tennessee. Really had no business losing that game. A couple of unlucky plays. Obviously, we have Simone Biles' husband getting you that touchdown, special teams touchdown. Very lucky win for the Bears. How about you take us down the board with Tennessee?
Sure. I mean, talk about a guy who has Rizz in real life that does not translate to fantasy football. Will Levis. Now, we all know this man has pretty good mayonnaise Rizz in real life, but it just does not work out on the football field. 19 passing completions out of 32 attempts is not good. 127 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 2 picks, one of which was horrible. That's all I have to say about Will Levis. He did not look like an NFL quarterback. But who I am excited about is Tony Pollard. He was great. 16 carries, 82 rushing yards, 5.1 yards per carry, gets that rushing touchdown, and also takes down 3 receptions for 12 yards. Now, at his price, Tony Pollard might be a league winner. People were expecting Tyjae Spears to come out here and lead this backfield. We're now seeing Tony Pollard is the guy. Tyjae had 4 carries for 21 yards. Not bad. He had 4 catches for 11 yards as well. He does get some receiving upside, but I think we can look to Tony Pollard as the league winner out of Tennessee. Calvin Ridley, another disappointment. 3 receptions for 50 yards. Not great. If you picked up DeAndre Hopkins in your draft, you're going to be disappointed. 1 reception for 8 yards. He might finally be washed at 32 years old. Now, Chigakonkwo did get that receiving touchdown, but Chiggy is probably not a starting tight end week in and week out because you have to rely on Will Levis's passing game and his lack of football Rizz.
Yeah, really good insights there. Will Levis is a terrible real life quarterback. You're not excited about any of these receivers and tight ends out of Tennessee right now. Calvin Ridley, you're starting him because you have to. You took him probably decently high in your draft, but you're not excited moving forward. And I think overall that was a bad pick. Tony Pollard, though, just going to echo some of your thoughts around him. Looks to be potentially a league winner. Was going around pick 100 in ESPN drafts. That is phenomenal value for a guy that gets you 16 carries, as well as the 4 targets out of the backfield and the touchdown. You're so excited if you drafted Pollard. I have a ton of Tony Pollard in underdog best ball drafts where I think we will be printing money with him rest of season. So that's a big takeaway out of that game is really that this is not a viable passing offense. Will Levis is terrible, but you're excited about Tony Pollard. Tajay Spears, don't start him. You can roster him if you want, I guess, but I'd personally rather pick up someone with league winning upside and you can just cut him if they don't get the volume that you expect. Moving along to Caleb Williams, Chicago Bears. Wow. Wow. This is just, this is gross. Caleb Williams puts up 93 yards, no touchdowns, 15 rushing yards. This is just so disappointing. I'm sure a lot of you actually start Caleb Williams. He's your quarterback one. You can't start him, at least for the next few weeks, till we see more out of him. Look, he's a rookie. These things happen, but he looked horrible. On the rushing side, DeAndre Swift. Yeah, I personally don't think that Swift is that good of a real life running back. 30 yards, 10 carries, couple catches. Actually, no catches. Apologies. I think you're pretty concerned about starting DeAndre Swift moving forward. On the receiving side, I mean, look, this is an outlier. Caleb Williams will not average 93 passing yards throughout the rest of the season. So I think this is a bit of an anomaly, but overall looks like maybe slightly less upside than many of you would have hoped for out of this Bears passing offense, at least for the next few weeks. So you probably lost your matchup if you drafted DJ Moore to be your wide receiver two, get you 8.5 points. Keenan Allen, this actually is an interesting takeaway. He has 11 targets, only 4 catches though. 11 targets is pretty huge. So if you drafted Keenan Allen, you're at least excited about that. I know it disappoints today, but if he has a role like that in this offense, yeah, that's a must-start guy. However, Rome will be the big loser out of this current target share breakdown. Just has 4 targets, 1 catch, 11 yards. You're probably not starting Rome anyway, but you took him with a ton of upside and definitely someone you're looking forward to playing in the later weeks. Just unsure of how things will pan out for now. So overall, disappointing from the Bears. Caleb might need a little bit more time to settle in and give you that explosive downfield playmaking ability that makes the weapons around him elite in fantasy, but we just haven't seen it yet.
Totally agree. Never expected DeAndre Swift to come out here and be a starter in fantasy lineups. I don't think he's a great back. Agree with everything else you said. How about we move on to the next game here? Kinc Chugs.
Great. Let's talk about the Jaguars and Finns. We'll keep this one a little bit shorter because there aren't too many takeaways out of this. You start your Dolphins, you start Tua. They have that downfield volume. All these guys are super electric. Tyreek is him. Get you 137 catches and the 80-yard TD. Beyond excited if you took him in the first round. Jalen Waddle, really good game. Really good game. Has that long breakaway catch, 63-yarder. Waddle was the guy I absolutely loved coming into the year, and I still love him. And you're very excited if you're able to draft him. Devon Achane, my starting running back one in our league. I absolutely love Devon Achane, and today he proved why. Doesn't really get there with his yards per rush today, just 24 on 10 attempts, but get you that goal line touchdown. And that is something that you're so excited about. Last year, they would have handed that off to Mostert. Today, they give it to Achane, and that gives him league winning upside, especially for a guy you're able to get in the third round. Beyond excited about him. Get you 7 catches, 76 yards off 7 targets. He is just electric. He's crazy explosive and looks to be that true RB1 in fantasy.
Totally agree. I think the main takeaway here is that Devon Achane is the truth down in Miami. Tyreek doing what you come to expect him to do, even after getting arrested and planted face down on the pavement this morning. Does not matter. Comes in, gets 7. He's the man. He always will be the man. Jalen Waddle also looked great. Mostert, like you said, absolutely washed. Can't start him for the rest of the year. Hopefully, we continue to see Devon Achane be the guy and get those rushing touchdowns and those goal line touches. But all remains to be seen. The Dolphins just do what you come to expect out of them with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Devon Achane, that explosive scheme. How about we turn it over to the Jags here?
Absolutely. Trevor Lawrence, I am not sure that you are a good NFL quarterback, sir. 12 completions, 21 attempts, 160 yards, and a touchdown. You probably will see Trevor starting in some leagues. So obviously super disappointing if that's the case. Could just be a bad week though. And you'll expect more production out of him moving forward. On the running back side, ETN solid, gets you the touchdown, 44 yards, just not super productive. Couple catches. I personally would have never taken ATN in the second or third round, so I just think that was a bad pick. You start him every week. I'm just not sure he has kind of that RB1 or top running back upside, but does okay this week. Big takeaway out of this, Evan Ingram, 1 catch, 5 yards. A lot of people are super high on Evan Ingram after the season he had last year. That's disappointing. But again, overall, not a lot of passing volume today out of these Jaguars. So you'll just have to monitor that if he's your starting tight end. And if he does this again next week, you're going to have to look to make a move in that position. How about you touch on Brian Thomas Jr. for us real quick?
Oh, man, the rookie out of LSU. I mean, he led all of college football in touchdowns. We know that he is the guy. He has a ton of Rizz on the field. 4 catches, 47 yards, and a receiving touchdown in what was an anemic passing offense today. You got to love BTJ going forward throughout the year. I think he's only going to get better. Don't be put off by Gabe Davis recording 62 receiving yards. He is not the guy. He's not going to be the guy. It seems like BTJ is going to claim the role in this offense as their best receiver. And I don't think that's too much of a surprise to a lot of people. What a fantastic best ball play. Like, absolutely. I was all over him in my underdog drafts. I love him going forward as a receiver in my fantasy leagues.
Completely agree on Brian Thomas. He's phenomenal. Looks to be a generational type downfield receiver. So really, really excited about him. If you got him in your redraft league as a stash play, you can probably look to start him sooner rather than later, next few weeks potentially. And in best ball, I took a ton of him as well. I think obviously this week he's printing you money. So very excited for BTJ. Not much else to talk about there on the Jags and Finn side. So let's move along now and quickly talk through the Denver Broncos going up to Seattle. They look okay. I don't know. It's kind of a gross game overall. You have any thoughts around the Broncos?
I mean, not a whole lot. I was expecting to see more out of Jaleel Laughlin. I mean, let's be honest, they're going to be splitting carries, but this is kind of a larger role than I expected Jaleel to really play at this point of the season. I expected him to take over that backfield in the future, but 10 carries versus Javante's 8, they were both pretty inefficient. 2.7 yards per carry for Jaleel and 2.9 for Javante. So not great there, but I think the volume for Jaleel was pleasantly surprising, and I would be excited if I were an owner of Jaleel in redraft leagues and best ball, especially because he is a best ball goat, as we know. The remainder of this offense, I just wouldn't touch it. Bo Nix, I don't have much faith in. He did get that rushing touchdown, but he also threw for 138 yards on 42 attempts. 0 passing touchdowns, and 2 picks. Not good enough.
Yeah, Bo Nix, tough rookie wake up moment in his first NFL game. Doesn't look good. Jaleel, though, completely agree on all those points. Did not expect to see double digit carries today. I know he's super inefficient on those, but if we see continuation of this volume, and if he is able to be more efficient with it, which we expect he is given his talent profile, this could be a really good redraft league move. Maybe he becomes your RB3, or maybe even your RB2 moving forward down in the next few weeks or so. Javonte, I don't know. I really like Javonte Williams, UNC guy, go Heels, but I'm not sure he's a real life uh, good running back anymore after the injuries. So I'm not sure if we're starting Javonte next week and moving forward. Let's talk about these Seahawks. Geno Smith gets the win, doesn't really look that good. I mean, I'm not the biggest Seahawk fan this year. I hated that DK Metcalf was going ahead of guys like Brandon Ayuk going in round 2, even round 3. I really didn't like that play. Today does pretty much nothing for you. 30 yards off 3 receptions. You're probably going to lose your matchup this week. I don't know. Moving forward on DK, he's never been a top 24 receiver in fantasy. I have no idea why year in and year out he keeps getting drafted like he's an elite fantasy player. We know he's a real life uh, good receiver, but you got to be concerned about that. Kenneth Walker, though, huge game, 100 yards, touchdown, 3 targets. You're super pumped up about that. I mean, this guy was high on going into the year. And looks to be that true bell cow running back and a running back 1 in fantasy. So I think that's the big takeaway out of this offense. Any thoughts on the receiver room or on Kenneth Walker?
I mean, Kenneth Walker had a great game. I wasn't able to watch too much of this, so I didn't watch too much of the film, but his box score is quite impressive. 20 carries, 103 yards, 5.2 yards per carry. Then that rushing touchdown. I mean, those numbers look good. You can't argue with the numbers. I agree with what you said
Mm-hmm.
on DK Metcalf. That is not good volume. He is not a great fantasy asset looking at it. JSN, a bit disappointing as well. People were very high on him. Tyler Lockett continuing to do what Tyler Lockett does and get a mid amount of fantasy points when he just catches ball and falls straight down. Not too much to add here. Other than that, I think we can move along to the next one.
Absolutely. Raiders going down to Los Angeles, basically a home game for the Raiders. Fall short, take the L this week. Gardner Minshew looks actually okay. I mean, he gets you just around 260 yards through the air, the touchdown and the pick. That's solid. I personally, I'm not starting anyone in Las Vegas outside of Devontae. I would never would have drafted Devontae, but if you have him, you start him. Hope he gets you the touchdown. Does okay this week with 5 for 60. Big takeaway for me around this game is Brock Bowers' role. 6 catches off 8 targets for 60 yards is really impressive for a pretty stagnant Raiders offense. So if you drafted him as your tight end 1, I think you're really happy, especially the price you got him at. Anything else around the Raiders? Look, Zamir White, he might be an okay running back, but he just simply doesn't have the target volume that you want. And I think you should be a little concerned if that's your running back too. But again, you probably shouldn't have drafted him over guys like Ramondre and James Conner. So it's kind of just on you. Any other
Yep.
thoughts around the Raiders?
No, totally agree. I never thought Zamir White was a good pick. We know Alexander Madison is straight up bad. Jacoby Myers seems to be bad situation proof. He's going to give you 9 points pretty much no matter what. That's just what you're going to get out of Jacoby, regardless of who the quarterback is, it seems. Brock Bowers, yeah, I would be excited. Not going to lie. That's a 6 catches for 58. That does the job. It's not flashy. It's not pretty yet. But looking forward, I think we can expect Brock Bowers to be that guy. Other folks were high on Trey Tucker as well. Do you have any thoughts there? I know he was definitely a best ball play, a best ball sleeper for some people, but I don't have too much faith.
Yeah, Trey Tucker. So I actually watched a lot of the Raiders this preseason, and Trey Tucker had a great preseason. So I wasn't really drafting him in best ball leagues just because I have zero faith in this Raiders offense. But he is pretty electric, dynamic player. You draft him in best ball in like the last round or something, you know what you signed up for. So moving forward, just keep an eye on him for best ball if he's able to go out there and get a punt return touchdown or a long breakaway touchdown, something like that. Nothing else to touch on with the Raiders from my side. So let's go ahead and talk about Justin Herbert, Jim Harbaugh, and those Chargers. So Herbert, 144 through the air, one touchdown. I don't know. Maybe it's just the new offensive scheme. They like to pound the rock. Are you concerned about Herbert as a starting QB in fantasy?
Well, at his ADP, he was never really expected to be a QB1 in fantasy, and I think we're seeing that injury still nag at him a little bit. So I would not be starting Justin Herbert, but I think you can expect if he manages to get rid of that injury, I think we'll see more of the Justin Herbert we're used to, even though his receiving room is god awful. But pleasant surprise out of this backfield. J.K. Dobbins, 10 carries for 135 yards and one rushing touchdown. To the contrary, Gus Edwards, 11 carries, 26 yards. You cannot be excited about that if you drafted and started Gus Bus. Jurgen.
No, you cannot be excited at all about Gus Bus. So I actually took Gus Edwards in our league, thinking that J.K. Dobbins would need more time to settle in. So maybe that was a guy I would consider starting for the first few weeks. I was wrong. The 29-year-old running back looks absolutely cooked. He does not look good. Go ahead and cut him, pick up someone else. I'm going to drop him this week for sure. J.K. Dobbins, though, back and healthy, looking like his old self, breaking off for the big run, getting the touchdown off of 10 carries. We can expect that he'll only increase his role in the next few weeks, given Gus Edwards' lack of playmaking ability. So if you drafted Dobbins, you're super excited. You're pumped up. You might have found a league winner in the later rounds. So keep an eye out for him over the next few weeks to increase his role, and probably just go ahead and throw him in your starting lineup next week. Looks to be back, and we know Jim likes to pound the rock. Ladd McConkey gets you 7 targets, leads the team in targets, 5 catches, 40 yards. You're still not starting Ladd McConkey, but you can keep on your bench and look for his role to increase and look for this passing offense to get a little bit more efficient. All right, last couple of games here to talk about. We'll move to the boys, the Cowboys. Jerry Jones's little team going up to Cleveland, getting the job done as underdog. Shocking. But Dak Prescott doesn't have the passing volume that you normally expect out of him. Gets the big contract today, but doesn't even break the 200-yard mark. Any thoughts around these Cowboys?
I mean, you've got two defenses like this on the field. I don't know that you can expect a ton of passing volume out of either team. I mean, especially when one of the quarterbacks is Deshaun Watson. It's just not going to go well for a guy like him. You know exactly what I mean by that. As far as the rushing aspect of the Cowboys offense, Zeke, 10 carries, 4 yards per carry, one rushing touchdown, kind of splitting carries with Rico Dowdle, who had 8 carries, 3.2 yards per carry. This is not great efficiency out of either one of them. I don't think that you should be starting either one in your RB1 or 2 spots, maybe a flex play if you see them up against a much worse defense. CeeDee Lamb, he got the volume, but again, this passing offense was not great. He got 5 catches for 61 yards, but he also had 3 carries out of the backfield, which you can expect them to use CeeDee Lamb in every game this year to a very high degree. He is by far and away their best weapon at every stage. Now, beyond him, Brandon Cooks, 4 receptions, 40 yards, 1 touchdown. You're not starting him. I don't think you should start him unless we see significant continuation of production. He could maybe be a flex play there. But other than that, I don't see too much out of this Cowboys offense that is super important to touch on.
Yeah, I do have one last thought on this. Jake Ferguson goes to the locker room with what looked to be a knee injury. We're not sure exactly what it is yet, but he will certainly miss time. We just don't know how much time. So if you drafted Jake Ferguson, you're definitely concerned. You drafted him, obviously, as your tight end one. Tight end position this year is absolutely disgusting by the looks of it. So that's definitely cause for concern for the next few weeks or so if Jake Ferguson is your tight end. All right. Let's move along to these Cleveland Browns. Home favorites against the Cowboys, and boy, do they disappoint. Deshaun Watson is a terrible, terrible real-life NFL quarterback. You also can't start him in fantasy, but I doubt any of you were anyway. One thing to note here on the Browns is Jerome Ford gets 12 carries, gets you a touchdown, and gets you 7 targets. 6 catches, 25 yards. That's not super productive, obviously, but that gets the job done in fantasy football, especially where you're able to get Ford at. So I think Ford is a must-start guy until Nick Chubb comes back. And if you drafted him, you're obviously excited about the next 3 to 4 weeks.
And that all being said, we don't know what Nick Chubb is going to look like when he's back. I don't think we've ever seen a back have his knee blown out like that 2 times in his career. It will be interesting to see if he's able to make it back and be the Nick Chubb that we know and love when he does get back. I agree. Jerome Ford owners should be excited about that volume in that offense. It doesn't seem like they have too much else with Deshaun Creepy Watson at quarterback.
Couldn't agree more on the Ford part. If Nick Chubb returns to full health and looks good, you're dropping Ford. However, if Ford is able to kind of maintain a solid role in this backfield, that could be a potential league winner. So something to keep an eye on. Obviously, you're disappointed if you drafted Amari Cooper, but that was not a particularly smart play to begin with. All right, last one for you guys here. Commanders, Bucks. Wow. I'm beyond impressed with Baker Mayfield. And you know I'm kind of a Tampa fan a little bit here and there. And he looked phenomenal. 24 for 30, gives you 289 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, only sacked once as well. Also has that nice 11-yard run, gets his shoulder down too. He looks phenomenal. I'm just going to say it. You got to start him. You have to start Baker Mayfield in your leagues. Go pick him up. He might even be on waivers. Go pick him up. Throw him in your lineup. He looked great. And because he looked great, receivers did phenomenal too. Mike Evans, 2 touchdowns, 60 yards. Chris Godwin, a guy I was super high on going into the year. I love Chris Godwin. Gets you 8 receptions, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Rachaad White has the bell cow role. He's just simply not an efficient running back. We saw that last year, but he just has all the work, especially out of the passing game, out of the backfield, gets you 75 yards. So you drafted White, you know what he is. He's gonna get the workload. He'll get you the fantasy points. So no change on him, other than the fact that it was such a blowout. Bucky Irvin comes in, gets 9 carries, 62 yards, but you don't have to be concerned about him really taking a huge chunk of Rachaad White's work going forward. Any thoughts around Tampa?
Baker is a league winner. He is a must start. Looked absolutely fantastic. Might have been the guy with the most Rizz in the league today. Fantastic. performance out of Baker Mayfield. I also thought Bucky Irving looked good. Like you said, Rashad White is what we know he is. Bucky Irving could be the guy if Rashad White ends up going down, and I think that he would be a long-term stash play. Again, like you said, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, just Mike Evans doing Mike Evans things. He doesn't seem like he's lost a step too much. Cone Godwin, a little bit surprising for me. I'm not super high on him. I know you are. We'll see if he can continue to put up these numbers. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did, especially with Baker performing at such a high level. I'm glad Baker
Nope.
got paid.
Absolutely. Couldn't be happier for my guy Baker. Just had the kid as well. No, the wife and him had been trying for a while. So great job, Baker. We'll talk about you in a little bit when we get to our Rizz play of the week. But phenomenal game out of these Bucks. On the Commanders side, yeah, Jaden Daniels, my starting quarterback, is kind of just who we thought he was. He had some flashes throwing the ball. He also had some forgettable moments. Doesn't have a pick though, which is you're happy about that. Gets you 184 passing yards, but where his value in fantasy football and frankly in the NFL comes from is his legs. 16 carries, 16. That is absolutely insane. 88 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Yeah, this is a guy you're starting every single week in fantasy football because of that rushing upside. And as a Jaden Daniels owner, I'm really excited. Am I excited about the Commanders? No, but I don't care if the Commanders win games. I just want Jaden to go down there and pound the rock, and he clearly is going to do that and has a ton of upside moving forward, potentially to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this season.
Totally agree. Now, something else we just have to point out, it's the elephant in the room. If you are drafting Austin Eckler, you are the idiot league mate. He is not good as a running back, and he's not getting the rushing volume that you would hope. Brian Robinson gets 12 carries for 40 yards, not terribly efficient, but he did get a rushing touchdown. He is getting the carries. Austin Eckler is not rushing the ball at all. He did get 4 receptions for 52 yards, but B Rob also got 3 for 49. Austin Eckler is not a valid weapon. He is not a good fantasy asset. You are not starting him if you have the choice.
Yeah, I'd say you can actually look to just drop Austin Eckler. I'm not really sure why he was drafted in ESPN leagues. I mean, he just doesn't have the explosive burst anymore. Gets a little bit of work out of the passing offense, though. Gets you 52 yard. Actually leads the team in receiving yards. But again, I mean, you're not excited to start any of these Washington receivers. If you drafted Terry McLaurin, you just fall for all of the highlights that, oh, he's like the best route runner in the league. This guy might be a good real life NFL player, but it's not going to translate into fantasy football production just given the passing volume down there. So you might need to look to make a move if that's your running back or if that's your wide receiver 3 or potentially wide receiver 2. Brian Robinson Jr., though, you're starting every single week. It's probably a low end RB2, but you're still starting him. And you're super happy about today's game from him. Gets the job done.
Yep.
That's all
Agreed
of
there.
my thoughts around the game so far. The Sunday night game, Rams at Detroit just kicked off, so have that on in the background. That should be an exciting one. We'll have to touch on anything that comes out of that in our next show. Same with Jets 49ers. Really excited to see Aaron Rodgers back in action, but I think the 49ers get the job done at home. And I'll also be taking them to cover the 3.5 points on DraftKings. If you're not using DraftKings, you go ahead and use my promo Kinc14. Click the link in the description below. Any other thoughts before we move on to our next segment, which is going to be the Rizz Player of the Week?
No other thoughts from me. I am very, very excited to get into the weekly Rizz Award. that goes to the NFL player who exhibited the highest amount of Rizz in the slate today. Would you like to kick that off?
Let's do it. So honorable mention goes to our guy, Baker Mayfield. Look, that was some impressive Rizz from Baker. We've gone through his stats already. You guys know what he did this week, but the way he did it, wow, that was Rizz. Putting his shoulder down into the linebacker on that 11-yard run, dropping absolute dimes, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, making zero, I repeat, zero mistakes. He had a fantastic game of Rizz.
Just
But
an impeccable amount of Rizz out of Baker Mayfield. You got to love that guy's Rizz.
yeah, that's some Rizz that I will personally be trying out at the bars next weekend. Let's talk about the winner. Without further ado, the player who exhibited the most Rizz this week goes to Josh Allen. Wow. He
Wow.
won them that football game.
Yeah.
Josh Allen is incredible. Great Rizz. You want to talk us through why Josh Allen won this award?
Just a fantastic amount of Rizz. He walks out there on that field, this Josh Allen, with flow just pouring out of the back of his helmet in waves. Had a slow start in the first half. Wasn't looking great for them Bills going down 10-0 in the first few minutes of the game. But Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things and rizzing up the whole league. 4 total touchdowns. That is just impeccable Rizz. Now, even without the supporting cast that he may have had in previous years with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, if you count him, Josh proved that he can go run solos at the bars and Rizz down chicks without any wingmen. And that, to me, is the most amount of Rizz for week 1 of the NFL season.
Just phenomenal Rizz. Thanks, N, for walking through that award. Let's give out the least Rizz of the week award. Who
Now,
showed that they have zero game? None.
man, this one is tough. This one is tough. We had to go and give the honorable mention to Joe Burrow. Now, the only reason, in my personal opinion, that we could not put him at number 1 is because we know for a fact he has in the past Rizz down Livy Dunn. So that alone precludes him from being the week 1 L Rizz candidate. However, the player in the NFL that showcased the least amount of Rizz, the most awful Rizz of the week, goes to Travis Kelce. Now, Travis, you always knew that him with his tendencies, let's say, he was going to come into the league with a nice fresh fade. And to be honest, looked like a pretty handsome guy out there rizzing up the field. Now, all that came to a head when he picked up his current bird, Taylor Swift. She has ruined his Rizz. It's absolutely awful. It's just classic girlfriend guy running out of Rizz and having zero game. Now, let's think about this. Let's see. Travis's new haircut, awful. That mustache, super creepy. And Taylor Swift on the screen every time he even catches one ball is just absolutely awful. He looks like a simp. He has no Rizz. That's all I have to say. Just terribly disappointing Rizz out of the 35-year-old Travis Kelce.
Phenomenal points on Travis Kelce. It's just pathetic. He's the guy that you're even hesitant to go to the bar with because you know his Rizz is so bad that there's no chance you're able to clean up either. Travis, pick it up, man. Go back to the fade. Get cleaned up. It looked terrible. You weren't involved enough in the passing game. So we'll need to see a lot more Rizz out of Travis Kelce. I'm not super optimistic, but for your team's sake, I hope he's able to clean up a little bit better at the bars in the next few weeks.
Let's
Okay,
hope so.
that was an exciting segment. Now let's move along to our biggest risers and our biggest fallers. So take us away on the risers.
Sure. I mean, you've got obvious guys here. Joe Mixon got to be the 101 riser of the week. He looked great. He looked fantastic on this Texans offense. That is just incredibly impressive. Joe Mixon leading the way just looked incredible. I don't think there's much more that needs to be said about Joe Mixon, despite the things he's done.
Despite the things he's right, but looks to be a phenomenal fantasy option this year, looks to be a potential league winner. And so big stock increase on Joe Mixon. Moving along to our next guy, Devon Achane, my running back one. Boy, did he look exciting. Gets a ton of volume, as we spoke about, in the passing offense. And again, this Miami offense is just so dynamic and electric that he's going to continue to increase his role and absolutely clean up at the running back one position down there. Again, potential league winner. I could not be more excited that I drafted him. And listen to this, the third round, Travis Kelce went ahead of Devon Achane. Just absolutely insane value, and could not be more excited for him.
Totally agreed there. Not much to add. Now let's move on to the next riser of the week, and that would be Rashee Rice. Now, people had hesitation coming over into this season because, weren't sure if he was going to get arrested and all that. Can ignore all that noise. That boy is a dog. He is going to be their one in Kansas City, soaking up all the targets from Patrick Mahomes, which you can be excited about, especially if Kelce continues to have Rizz throughout the season.
For sure. Rashee Rice is that guy down in Kansas City. Could be a potential wide receiver one over the next few weeks. So great week from Rice, and expect a lot more production out of him moving forward as well. Last one here is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. Harped on him already. Absolute phenomenal week. Basically won them the football game out there in Ohio, and looks to be a very, very talented running back. Also has the receiving volume. So if you drafted him, you're super pumped. He has kind of top RB2 upside, in my opinion. So where you got him, you're printing money right now, and hopefully he's able to remain this efficient moving forward, but clearly has the volume here in New England. Let's talk about some fallers. You want to kick us off here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, think about going into this season where a guy named Mark Andrews was getting drafted, just horribly disappointing at that price. Sort of the same story as Travis Kelce, but even worse. I wouldn't say he had less Rizz, though. Mark Andrews did look terrible, and I don't expect him to take the job back from Isaiah Likely. Maybe I'll eat my words on that. Maybe he'll get back into stride. But for now, I definitely don't see Mark Andrews' stock going back up in the next few weeks.
Absolutely agree on Mark Andrews. You're very concerned if you got him. He might not have a huge role in this tight end room with the Isaiah Likely breakout. He's only 29 years old, though, and is coming off an injury. So potentially still has a good amount of upside. I'm just personally out on Mark Andrews after last game, but I hope I eat my words. Another big faller, my guy, Dalton Kincaid, 2 targets. I'm sick to my stomach. I can't believe this. Dawson Knox still has the role up there, but given the lack of weapons, or so I thought in Buffalo, I expected Kincaid to have a massive role, potentially 6 to 8 targets a game, have the red zone role from Josh Allen, but it didn't happen today. And if it doesn't happen next week, I will be panicking, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for the week just because I am so high in his talent profile and the situation there in Buffalo.
Totally agreed. Now, I think we should move on to the next guy, Maserati Marv. Man, where he was going, you'd expect much bigger things out of him. That price was just incredibly high. Granted, he's a rookie, he's fresh, it's week one. I still expect him to do great things this season and going forward. I just don't know that that is going to happen in the near term. So I see his stock falling temporarily. In the meantime, potential buy target in the next couple weeks. Once we start seeing more of this card's offense, his price will rise back up. But for now, I think his stock has certainly fallen from where he was taken in the draft.
For sure. For sure. Marv, great player. Can expect to see hopefully a big week next week, but definitely a riser given his price point in the second round of ESPN drafts. Moving along now to Chris Olave. Chris Olave, you might be a bum. You have 11 yards, 2 receptions, 2 targets, all while your team put up 47 points. That is extremely concerning. Extremely concerning. If I drafted Olave as my wide receiver one or high end wide receiver two, I'm probably panicking. I think I have no chance to win this league anymore. I thankfully did not, because I think Derek Carr is a terrible real life quarterback. So Olave, very, very disappointing. Huge faller for me this week as well.
Totally agreed there. Great analysis. Now, our last faller of the week, and let's be honest, there were definitely others that could go on this list, but for now, Terry McLaurin is your last faller of the week. Now, Scary Terry, like we said, probably a good real life player. His highlights are very impressive. He just doesn't get it done in fantasy. 4 targets, 2 receptions, 17 yards. I don't trust this Jaden Daniels passing game. I think he needs a lot more time to develop. And Terry, he just probably isn't that guy for now. Where you were getting him in drafts, while it may have seemed cheap to other years, this Commanders offense is just not good. They are terrible, and Terry cannot be expected to be a wide receiver one or two going forward.
For sure. And that wraps up our biggest risers and fallers segment. Hopefully, we provided some good insight for you to make better decisions with your fantasy team over the next week. Let's go ahead and talk about some waiver plays. Honestly, not a super exciting week from the waiver wire perspective. You might not even be making any moves. It's not like a year ago when we had Kyron Williams and Puka absolutely break onto the scene and they were must grab guys on waivers. So we'll talk about one guy here, Wandell Robinson. Spoke about him when we covered the Giants game, but he gets to 12 targets. 12 targets is pretty impressive. If he's able to get that dominant target share, obviously with some regression over the next few weeks, you're going to want to pick him up. You might even want to start him. So be on the lookout for him, depending on how deep your bench is and players you could potentially look to cut. Can certainly consider picking him up if you need some depth at the wide receiver position. Unfortunately, just given Daniel Jones and that passing offense, he doesn't look to be a league winner, but could add some depth at that position for you. You want to talk about our next guy?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to. This guy is just a great locker room guy, super heady, very intelligent ball player. Of course, we are talking about Alec Pierce. Now, if your idiot league mates did not draft him, you should be looking to pick him up on the waiver wire this week. Now, he looked very good. He was getting good separation. His routes were great, intelligent, just played his heart out on the field, and he can be expected to capture that upside from AR, his arm. He targeted Alec Pierce 3 times. Alec Pierce came down with the ball 3 times for 125 yards on 3 receptions. He is probably one of the best ball plays. I don't know that we can expect him to get these deep balls week in, week out, but AR is going to chuck that ball, and Alec Pierce is probably going to come down with it. If your league mates are not sharp enough to have drafted him, you should be picking him up 100% of the time.
Absolutely looks to be an incredibly heady player for the Colts. My one concern, though, is Josh Downs will be coming back over the next few weeks, and he kind of served as that deep ball threat last season. So could expect a reduction in the role of Alec Pierce, but certainly on best ball, if you're able to grab Alec Pierce, you're sharp enough to do that. You printed money this week, and you're very excited. So probably more of a best ball play, but depending on how deep your format is, you can consider picking him up until Josh Downs comes back. All right, let's move along and talk about the comeback player of the week. Who's going to win this award for you this week in fantasy?
Man, as much as I hate to do this as a former recovering Giants fan, Saquon Barkley's got to be the guy. 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 receiving. He just is Saquon Barkley that we think he is. He's continuing to be that guy. He does not look washed. The unfortunate nature of it is that the Giants made this decision to trade him, videotaped it, and put it on HBO for the world to see. What a sad organization there in New York. Just pathetic. Saquon Barkley is your comeback player of the week here at the Rizz Zone.
Very impressive stuff out of Saquon Barkley. Looks to have running back one overall upside and clearly a big bounce back from the awful situation he was in last year with the pathetic Giants. Complete joke of an organization. Okay, that brings us to the end of our show here. Thank you all so much for tuning in to our week one fantasy recap. This is the Rizz Zone. I'm King Chugs. Alongside me is N Fantasy. We hope you enjoyed and be on the lookout for our week 2 podcast coming out next Sunday. Thank you all again and go Pats.